Joining us now in the Element Well studios, Douglas Carswell, the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy, and Douglas Murray, author and Fox News contributor. Thanks for coming in this morning, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Very good to be here.
Big fan of your work, Douglas.
Thank you.
Always enjoy watching your interviews. Always very insightful and learn a lot, and sometimes even use some of that on the show. So
I'm very glad to hear it. It's all yours. If you ever say anything that you appreciate.
Awesome. So you're in town because I believe you guys have an event. MCPP does today, and
We do.
Mr. Murray's in town.
We do. Douglas has written a book which is now a bestseller on both sides of the Atlantic.
Yep.
And he is talking about that at River Hills in Jackson this afternoon in front of a very large crowd of Mississippians who are going to hang on to his every word.
Absolutely.
No, I'm thrilled. I'm very, very pleased to be here in Jackson. Very pleased to be in the state, and very pleased to be talking about my book, The War on the West.
Yeah. Have dug into it a little bit and read some interesting reviews of it as well, of course. I think it's spot on, and I'm so glad that someone is calling attention to what seems to be an effort to sort of, I use one of the left's favorite words, to reimagine or dismantle what has been a fairly good run, I think, for the West of this part.
That's right. I think that the left always wants to dismantle everything apart from itself.
Yeah.
They want to tear apart everything apart from themselves. And they have had a very good run in recent years at trying to tear apart everything in Western history, everything in American history in particular. They have told us we have nothing to be proud of, we have nothing to be grateful for, that America is founded in sin and we've just got to spend our lives apologizing for that and endlessly going over it. And I think this is, at this point, this isn't even a constructive thing that they're doing. It's completely destructive. They don't want to add context to historical discussions. They want to end context. They don't want to just slightly refine America. They want to defame America. And what I describe in The War on the West is how this came about, because this is very unusual. You know, most civilizations don't behave like this. They don't tear themselves and everything that's good about them to pieces.
Right.
You know, they don't allow their children to be indoctrinated by messages that are totally hostile to the country and the society. Most societies don't behave like this.
Right. You know, the way I have described it, Douglas, is it is a march to mediocrity. Mm-hmm. And what bothers me is that we see the left always getting enraged with this refrain, it's the end of democracy, and everything's the end of democracy. But, in fact, it's when we focus, I believe, when we are obsessed with and we focused on our stains of the past, when we dismiss our founding as being illegitimate, when we characterize George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson as just bad, vile, wicked, evil humans, and then we thrust that upon our children in the schools, how can you expect to produce productive adult citizens if while they are youngsters, when they're so impressionable, we're filling them up with all this hate and disdain for the very country in which they were born?
I'm going to steal your phrase, the march to mediocrity, because this is exactly what is going on. Americans are being urged to have a different story about the country, look at it in a different light. Everything, as you say, from the founding fathers through the Civil War, everything is being looked at in a negative light. The story of America, even 20 years ago, was portrayed as a story, as it is, of heroism, of courage. I was reading Paul Johnson, British historian's History of the American Peoples, just the other week, published in 1999, not that long ago. The opening line, he says, the story of the American peoples is the greatest story of courage in history. Now, in 20 years, that sentence would not be used now. We would have a history of the American peoples that would have to begin with America was born in sin, Americans, etc. And as I say in The War on the West, this is not just self-defeating but untrue. What we are being told about the American past and the American present is untrue. We are being urged to tear ourselves apart about things that happened hundreds of years ago and be totally ignorant of what is happening in the world now. I give the example. There are 40 million slaves in the world today.
Right.
Okay, that's more slaves than there were in the world in the 19th century. Here's one suggestion. Wouldn't it be good if we concentrated on stopping slavery today instead of discussing precisely who is still suffering for it 200 years later in America? I mean, this isn't to do down anyone's personal suffering or anyone's personal stories, but can we get our priorities straight? You know, when we talk about we hear all the time from the left, the institutional racism and much more in America. Can we address the fact that the only country in the world likely to overtake this one as the world's first economy in the 21st century is China, which has 1 million people in concentration camps as we speak? You know, can we get our priorities in order? And one of the reasons we don't have our priorities in order is because very hostile anti-American, anti-Western activists have totally hijacked the debate in schools and much more. And if there's a positive thing about the last few years, it's that the American public are now on to this. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
The parents' revolt has been such an inspiration to me, because we shouldn't wait around for a politician to come and save us. You know, America has been the history of the people saving themselves.
Exactly.
And that's what's happening now in states like this one. People find out their children are being radically indoctrinated, and they stand up. The parents stand up and they say no. They apply to get on the school board and much more. That is one of the most optimistic stories, and it's why I think in the short term we're in for a heck of a ride in America. I live here now, so I say we.
Yep.
I think we're in for a heck of a ride in the short term. But in the long term, there is no way that you can bet against the American people.
What we seem, in my view, Douglas, and ask you to comment on this, to have lost is the art of nuance. An example is, I can support the fact that these great founders committed sins because they're flawed humans and they committed sins. Okay, it's okay to acknowledge that, to teach that, but we also must recognize their gifts, their contributions,
it's not all
their
did.
talent. By the way, we're all like that. If we were all judged expressly and explicitly on the basis of the worst parts of our character, we'd all be bad people.
More than that, let's say we have to behave today as we think people will approve of us behaving in the year 2300. Well, we don't know what they're going to believe. We don't know how we're going to be judged 200 years from now. All we can do is behave as well as we can and do the right things as we see it today.
Right.
We're going to get some things wrong. There are going to be things that people look at us 200 years from now and they're going to think, wow, what were those guys thinking in 2022? Surprise, surprise, people change. Being forgiving of people in history with flaws and all is wise, not just because it's a good attitude towards the past, but because we want people after us to be forgiving towards us.
Sure.
And we have been living through an era where we're totally unforgiving. And by the way, my own country of birth in Great Britain, we're doing the same thing now. We've imported America's culture wars on this. And we now have, for instance, the person who was voted 20 years ago, and quite rightly our national hero, Winston Churchill, is now repeatedly defamed because people say he got this wrong, he got that wrong. Yeah, he also helped save the world from Nazism and probably did more than anyone else to defeat fascism in the 20th century. You'd have thought that counted for something.
There it is, one of the book reviews of your book. There it is right there, defacing a statue. What do they call him, a rouse or something? Right?
This is being shown, the photograph of the statue of Winston Churchill in Westminster, in London. That statue of Churchill had to be boxed up in a steel box in the summer of 2020 when BLM protesters in London kept crossing Churchill's name out and putting in graffiti, Churchill was a racist.
A racist,
racist. They're not very good graffiti artists. It's hard to read. But some of them later were better. They kept saying Winston Churchill was racist. Did Winston Churchill have 2020's views on race? No. He was a Victorian. He was born in the Victorian era, so he had some Victorian ideas, amazingly. Again, it should count as something if you stand alone against Adolf Hitler. You know, you'd have thought there should be something in the positive. It's the same thing with Thomas Jefferson. Did he own slaves? Yeah. On the other hand, he helped found the most successful republic in the world. Should count as something.
We got a quick break right here. Can you guys hang around one more segment?
Yeah,
you good
of course.
for that? Yeah. Because should we not recognize that his efforts actually paved the way to enable these people that were treated unfairly to rise up and participate in the success of the system? Should we recognize that as well?
Of course.
We got Douglas Carswell from Mississippi Center for Public Policy, author and Fox News contributor, Douglas Murray in studio. We'll be right back. In the studios, Douglas Carswell, the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy, and Douglas Murray, author and Fox News contributor. So, Douglas, I just want to continue this line of thought that it just really grinds my gears, which is this litmus test of purity that the left seems to apply in our society and culture. There's so many situations where I think that nuance applies. I can be for fossil fuels and the leveraging of the abundant resources that God has blessed us with in this country, but I can be opposed to just abuse and just spewing black air, black smoke into the atmosphere. There's got to be some moderation, some common sense balance there as an example. But it seems like everything is got to go all in 100%.
Right.
And you could just apply that to a broad spectrum.
Oh, sure. I mean, almost any issue. In my previous book, Before the War on the West, I wrote a book called The Madness of Crowds, about all the gender nonsense and all the stuff that's been going on in America. And I quote Dave Chappelle as being a great example of a incredibly talented American comedian who also, quite rightly, does one of the things comedians are meant to do and says things that are true or people kind of sense are true and makes fun of it and riffs on it. Look at that. I mean, Dave Chappelle says some things about trans which are completely true, and also he presents it in a funny light. He's not being mean to anyone. He's on stage a couple of nights ago and somebody attacks him. We're in this situation where on issue after issue, anyone, including even comedians, who introduce any nuance or anything into things are suddenly attacked for doing so. And
crazy.
That's maddening when it's like a fringe issue like trans or something. But when it's like the main issue, which is your country, is America a good country? Has it been a force for good in the world generally? And you turn that issue into something where you're not allowed any nuance. You're not allowed to say anything good. In that situation, quite rightly, the American public start to get angry because they know that there must be something good about America. Otherwise, this wouldn't be the number one destination for migrants in the world, among other things. As I observed quite a lot in the last year when I've been living here in America, when the 2 million or more illegal migrants cross the border from Mexico into America, they do not meet Texans trying to break into Mexico and make their way south to Venezuela. So there's something good about America now, clearly, and we all know it, or we should know it. And if there's something good about America now, that must mean something good was done in the past.
Yeah.
We didn't just get here by accident. It didn't just land like this. It landed like this because amazing men and women from a bewildering array of countries and backgrounds built this country into the thing it is today.
Yeah, and we should celebrate that, of course. Yes. You look no further than the DeSantis bill in Florida. Speaking of nuance and how you get a narrative that gets a life of its own, and it's almost like they want it to be that. It doesn't say don't say gay, but they so desperately want it to that they start fabricating and making it up because it is politically expedient.
It's even worse than fabricating and making it up. They fabricate it, make it up, and then cry about it.
That's true.
I mean,
I heard Jen Psaki crying about it on the podcast. We played it.
Jen Psaki cries about something that is not happening, which people like her made up.
It's like I weep for the dehumanizing.
How much time do you have to have on your hands to make something up and then weep about it?
That's a good point.
It used to be called fiction.
It used to be called fiction, absolutely.
So, related to this discussion, I played yesterday, or may have been the day before, but it was Joy Reid. I like to tune in and see what she has to say over there on MSNBC, and she had Lawrence O'Donnell as a guest. And what Lawrence O'Donnell was talking, and they were talking about the abortion, the apparent abortion ruling, and what he said was that the Senate and the structure of the U.S. Senate is a, quote, disaster. And basically calling for a remaking of our Constitution and the way our government is structured. And he said it's because the founders, I really couldn't quite follow it, but what he was really trying to say is the idea of having a body where there are 2 representatives, equal representation across the 50 states is a problem. He said the founders never anticipated the state of California would have a population that approaches that of France, and they didn't anticipate that most of those residents would live in cities with Spanish names. And I had no idea what the heck that had to do about the Senate.
I think he was probably hard to follow because he didn't know what he was saying himself. I suspect that was the problem going on there. The thing that amazes me at the moment is that there's not one institution in America that the left doesn't want to tear down. I mean, they're constantly talking about the right undermining institutions. But, I didn't know they were coming for the Senate. I mean, I have seen...
Electoral College, you know about that one. They want to tear that one down.
And, of course, the Supreme Court in recent years. I mean, I would like to see, by the way, a moment's condemnation from the Democrats about this unprecedented leak of a draft judgment from the Supreme Court. We're now in a situation where Supreme Court justices are going to have their homes protected because there are Democrats saying that they should all be put under pressure, that there are people trying to release their addresses. Can we spend a moment focusing on the fact that the Supreme Court is being undermined as we speak? Whether you agree with the draft judgment or not, spend a moment on recognizing that this institution is being. It's like they're tunneling under it and trying to blow it up, and the Senate and everything else. There's nothing they don't want to tear apart, and at some point you have to say, if you want to tear down all of our existing institutions and you don't like anything about our past, is this really a critic or a revolutionary movement we're talking about?
Good point. There's zero mention of the violation of the sanctity and the rules and the standards of the court with respect to the leak. Zero. And in fact, I think once we learn whoever it was, they'll be hailed as a brave hero. They'll end up with mega book deals and end up with their own show on MSNBC in primetime for us all over.
And a documentary on Netflix about their bravery. Exactly. Now, this is the problem, and this is what I try to focus on, the war on the West, is that we have become used to beating up on ourselves, and we celebrate people who beat up on us. And that is just a very unnatural situation to be in. Most people aren't like that. I don't think most Americans are like that either. We want to think well of ourselves in America. We want to think well of ourselves in the West. Not just, and by the way, so we should, not just because people like to think well of themselves, but because the facts happen to be on our side. As I say, what are the number one destinations of the world people want to come to? America and the other Western democracies. Nobody's trying to break into China. No one's trying to head into the sanctity of Saudi Arabia and Yemen. People want to come to Western democracies. That must mean that we've done something well and that we're doing something well. And I just wish that we could find a way to make sure the next generation of Americans realize how lucky they are to be born in America, how lucky we are to have America, and not be taught that everything up till them is terrible. And that, and the whole of history was waiting for the magnificent me generation of 2022. Perhaps people from the past have something they can teach us.
Sure. And I don't know why we seem to only focus on that which is negative, that which all of us. So even those of us on the right, it's not that we condone those past sins. We accept that, we acknowledge it, but we can't fix what happened in the past. We want to focus on what to do in the future and make it better. And I think we have the more perfect union. I think that was the idea because the founders knew, hey, we're flawed humans. We may have something screwed up here, and we're going to continue to make it better.
And they couldn't do everything then. I mean, that's one of the important things, is what the founders knew. You couldn't do absolutely everything then and hold the republic together.
But shouldn't we herald the very system that enabled that? Because without that system, we could not have achieved betterness.
Exactly. And, I saw in New York last year the statue of Thomas Jefferson being pulled down from its position in the state capitol, and it was crated up and taken out of the back door. And one of the members of the council said in New York that this was necessary because, quote, Thomas Jefferson doesn't represent our values.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, I want to know what these ladies' values are, first of all, and why they are so superior to Thomas Jefferson's that she thinks that you can crate up Thomas Jefferson. I'm not sure that she and the other radical leftists who do this are going to look so great in a few years' time, let alone a couple of centuries' time.
Yeah.
It's a good thing we're not putting up statues to these people because they'd be pulled down in a matter of months.
It's unbelievable. The other one that you hear is that our Supreme Court, our cabinet, all these other institutions, they have to look like America. Well, it isn't the way somebody looks the essence of racism. These are anti-racist people that say it's got to look. It doesn't matter what their qualifications, experience, credentials, value proposition is. It's how they look.
The anti-racists, as they call themselves, are obsessed with racism, and they are themselves now racist.
It's unbelievable. You got to go. You can hang around one more time. I know you're about.
I think we're a little pushed for time.
Okay. Yeah, I know you got your event starting at 11:30 today.
We've got a big crowd coming.
Tell us about it one more time before we go.
We've got War on the West being talked about in Jackson. Every 10 or 20 years, a book comes along that changes the way America thinks. Milton Friedman wrote one. Newt Gingrich wrote one. Douglas Murray's War on the West is just such a book.
And you're going to be at River Hills today, starting at 11:30, right?
Exactly.
Talking about it. It's been great to have you guys in the studio.
A real honor
Thanks
for
a lot.
me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We'll take a step aside right here, and we'll be right back on Midday. Stay with us.